back. Episode 4 of the unnamed, hopefully soon to be named podcast.
We're working on it.
Maybe it'll just be the Goldilocks podcast.
It's in the running.
Yet.
It's in the running.
Top 5.
Yeah.
And at the end of our last episode, we were talking a lot about building our culture, which we kind of, it was very organic. We had some ideas of, maybe some different books that we read about like how to build a corporate culture, corporate business. We are a corporation, so that's where that word comes from. Doesn't feel very corporate here. It's very, very relaxed, inclusive, loving, and embodies, I guess, like both of our personalities. And that's something that was really important to us.
Yeah.
So we're going to dig into like how we did that and what we've been doing for 5 years. But first, as we talked about at the end of the last episode, our biggest either personal or financial business fuck up that we've had. And I want you to go first.
I had a hard time with this, trying to think of something. I was almost going to be like, Brett, what do you think my biggest fuck up is? And see what you would think. I don't think I've lost the company like a whole. We
lose money all the time.
We lose money all the time, but like I've never really been like, oh, I did something like bad. Like that feeling where you're like,
yeah, oh,
like I really screwed up. Like,
right.
The business is in jeopardy. Like I can't think of anything like that. I actually went back a little bit further as I was like thinking about this last night to my previous job and had something that kind of stood out to me. And it was because it was completely my fault. Like no one else was involved in this. It was just, and it was stupid. Like it was just an oversight. At the end of the day, fairly anecdotal, like my life wasn't over or anything like that. But I just remember being in that moment and like my heart just
pure
like,
terror.
Yeah, like dropping. So the previous job I'm talking about was when I was planning weddings and events. So as you can imagine, weddings feel very high stakes, like on the day, right? Like we would do like 25, 30 weddings every summer. So to me, it kind of became like very commonplace, all that kind of stuff. But you always have to remember that to the bride, like that is their big day. It is the day. And over the years of working, I'd had like some pretty, great and sometimes also comical conversations. You kind of become a bit of a like therapist sometimes for people, where you're like, are you crying because of the napkin color, or are you crying because your third aunt twice removed is being mean to your mom whose cousin, you know what I mean? Then you end up like getting into these really like in-depth dynamics. Like family dynamics that come out.
Emotions are coming up.
And then you realize it's not the sage green instead of the forest green. It's actually like all of these other things. And I feel like I got really good at reassuring people that like their day was going to be amazing. And like we were there to support them. Because again, I worked for the venue, not necessarily for the couple. So it was a very unique kind of dynamic. But we took care of everything at this wedding location. So there was the venue, we did all of the food. And then there was like and we did the bar as well. Those were mandatory. At one point, the DJ was mandatory that you booked through us because we had like noise restraints and stuff like that. And then there were add-on options. Like you could get your flowers done by us. You could have like a late night like sweets table. Like you think of it like we could probably do it.
Right.
And so I had these like big binders that just had everybody's like wedding planners in them. So I was responsible for, they filled them out. I organized them in a way that made sense for our staff. I set up the day. I coordinated with the kitchen. So like basically I gave the menu for the day to the kitchen, all those kinds of things. It was relatively straightforward, but there's just a lot of information that goes into a wedding day. Yeah. And I remember this one in particular. The bride still doesn't know this, which is great. That's the best part. They never found this out, but they had booked a dessert table for later in the evening. And it was like mid-afternoon. I think they were headed into the barn for dinner. And I basically run around with a clipboard all day. And I saw that there was the dessert table. Like it had been paid for. I had like a list of all the things that the kitchen was supposed to have made and prepped like the week of. And I forgot to include it on the kitchen menu. So
just no desserts?
They had nothing. Nothing. So there was
How did they not notice?
So because it hadn't come out yet. So the table is supposed to come out at a certain time in the evening after the cake and like after all of these things. So I was lucky in the sense that it was like 3:00 in the afternoon. I went into the kitchen in like a panic, and Lisa was the chef at the time, and I was like a deer in headlights, like, oh my God, Lisa, what do we do? And she was like, I can't help you. We're already in the middle of cooking dinner for the wedding. You can't like all of a sudden turn around and start baking. And this is a really tiny kitchen as well. Like it was a very, very small commercial kitchen, but like super tiny working space. She was just like, I'm really sorry, but like basically, you know, here's a couple suggestions, but you're gonna have to figure this one out on your own. And I was like, I cannot go to this bride and tell her that I just forgot. Like that is inexcusable. And so what I ended up doing was I rounded up, I think like 4 or 5 of our staff, because it happened to be at a little bit of a downtime for the actual staffing portion. And I basically sent everybody off on errands to different local bakeries. I had like called like probably 10 different places to find out like what they carried, what they had in stock, like all of these different things. Wanted to make sure they were local.
Did you have like a budget of like?
Oh, at this point I was like, I don't even care.
Just
like,
go buy shit.
Just go buy like whatever we need to buy. I don't care how much it costs. Like that's like, this was my fault. Like, you know what I mean? I don't care what we have to do to make this right. And wanted to still make sure that they're going somewhere local, like not, you know, like a local bakery, not like we're not going to go buy like a wedding dessert table from like the grocery store kind of thing. So still getting like really high end, like, you know, custom cupcakes and like all that kind of stuff, and called in some favors from some people that we'd worked with as vendors to like.
They were custom cupcakes?
Well, no, like just I called in like a couple of favors to places that were like, you know, can you like whip this up in the next like half hour for us? Like that kind of thing. Well, so with these specific flavors and whatnot. So then the dessert tray came out and nobody knew. And it was funny because this was like probably the lesson that I took away from that. Everybody else was like, after the fact, was like, wow, you handled that really well. Like you were very calm. And I was like, really? Because in my head and in my body, I was dying. Like it felt like there was somebody inside of me just yelling on full blast, like,
like, you fucking idiot.
Yeah, like, how did you do this? Just having like a complete internal meltdown. And I was like a little proud that apparently no one
could detect it,
picked up on that. I do think that running weddings, I've always said this, is kind of like running like I've never been in theater, but I have friends that do a lot of theater stuff. I feel like it's sort of the equivalent in the sense that it's like once it starts, the show must go on.
Right.
So like it does not, it doesn't matter what goes wrong. You need to just be ready to go with like whatever happens. Like there's just crazy stories that happen. Like we've had to call ambulances in the middle of a wedding from someone like passing out from heat stroke. Like, and you're like, we just need to figure out how to make this a great day for you and like calm everybody down. We had a tornado once.
Holy shit.
The food actually started to blow away. Like I should have a whole separate podcast just on the crazy stories that happen at weddings. They're hilarious, but I feel like it did teach me to kind of like roll with the punches.
Yeah.
And be really good at like not freaking other people out.
Right.
Sometimes, I mean, you know, we're humans. Sometimes it's not like perfect, but kind of being like good and a little bit more calm in those situations of just being like, okay, I'll freak out later. We just need to figure this out right now.
Totally.
And then I'm pretty sure that evening I would probably cried or like was just like so upset with myself because I'm also really hard on myself. So when it was something like that was just like, and there was like no reason. It was just like pure.
Yeah.
Just like lack of paying attention. Yeah. But I also think that was a very similar experience to when we did the Tell Us Pitch contest.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what that reminds me of when I talked about like there just being this like voice inside my head that was just like, bah! The whole time.
Yeah.
Like that was exactly what happened when I was on stage.
When you're on stage?
Yeah.
Really?
I don't remember any of what happened when I was on stage. I almost feel like I blacked out.
You just rehearsed it so many times that like
it was on autopilot.
Wow, crazy.
So to give some context to anybody listening for that, I guess this would have been like 3 years. It was pre-pandemic.
Summer 2019.
Yes. Yeah. So Brett, I think one night, super sleepily on your phone, submitted an application to this.
That's my favorite part.
Yeah, this contest that he had seen somehow on like social media, online somewhere. that was a bit of a long shot, but there was like a chance to win up to $100,000 for your business. But you have to go through all of these various stages of like making the top 100, making the top 10, making the top 3. And the top 3 get to go to Toronto and pitch live on stage to basically like a bunch of business gurus who decide who the winner is going to be and who's going to win like all of this money.
It's like a Dragon's Den, Shark Tank kind of style. You're pitching your business in a minute and a half, and then
basically like, why you should give us some
why
money.
Are we giving you $100,000?
Yeah. And it was very short. It's actually so hard.
I think it was a minute and a half.
Yeah, it was
which is not like, it seems short, but that is a very long time to just consistently talk. You can do it on a podcast forever, but in a room full of like 300 people with these 5 intimidating judges sitting off to the side, like my heart rate was through the roof, and I wasn't I was just off to the side, like biting my nails, like, oh shit.
You were the most nervous I think I maybe have ever seen you, because I feel like you don't usually give off nervous vibes either. Like you're usually very composed. So but it's like I can talk about the business for hours. Like if I had an unlimited amount of time to get up on stage, I wouldn't be nervous at all. But I was nervous because it was like, the buzzer is going to go off at a minute and a half, and I have all of this important information. So I actually had to memorize everything.
Right.
And I feel like it was the same thing where people were like calling us after and like texting and being like, that was amazing. And in my head, they were like, oh, you were so calm. I think you even said that. And I was like, I did not feel calm.
Right.
Like, and I remember
autopilot switch.
Yeah.
Just engage.
And I thought people were just being nice, because it is like a high stress situation. So I was like, even if I did come across as like super flustered, I was like, people are probably just going to tell me I did great anyway.
Right.
But I remember watching the video back because they recorded it and being like, oh, what was happening in my brain and the way I came across. Because like I did actually look very calm. I was like, these are two very opposing
Were you shaking
things.
at all?
No.
That's so interesting. Fuck, I've only done it a handful of times in my life, like getting up and talking in front of a room full of people, my body just goes into like pure terror, fright.
Really?
Like, flight mode. Like I just want to get the hell out of there. It's strange. Like at that, the trade accelerator program, it was day 1. It's like 9 a.m. I had like pretty sleepy, and they're like, okay, everybody get up and pitch your business. You go first. And I was just like, oh my God. And there's only like 20 people in the room, but I got up there and I was just shaking so much.
Really?
And I was like, I actually said it over the mic. I'm like, I'm shaking a ton right now. I don't know what's going on with my body. And they're like, just calm down. You're fine. I'm like, I feel calm, but like I'm physically freaking out. Like I'm sweating from everywhere. And I just said it. I was like, I don't know what's happening. Like, is my voice shaking? They're like, no. I'm like, can you guys see my hands shaking? They're like, no. And I'm like, how does no one? It's so weird. Yeah. It's like, how do you not see this? And maybe it was just an internal thing.
Yeah, it's like your body trying to override.
Yeah.
Because you know that it's stressful. I was sweating. I was like very, very, it was also hot too. But I remember I was like definitely sweating a ton. I talk with my hands a lot.
Right.
Which I think helps with the like fidgetiness or like the jittery kind of like, you know what I mean? Of like shakiness with your hands. Because then if I'm just like doing something with my hands, I feel like
I was like
better.
holding a piece of paper. So it's just.
Yeah.
It was so bad. But then you were also, for this wedding thing, it was a Netflix show called Taste of the Country.
Oh, yeah. That didn't make it. That was before we were on.
That's too bad that episode wasn't it?
They would have loved that. I felt like they were always so shocked. Like the producers are like the people who were kind of like, filming the show.
Right.
I feel like we're just constantly like, nothing frazzles you guys. And we were like, well, yeah, so like you just got to figure it out. Like I feel
the
like
show must go on.
Yeah. Which again was really great lessons for learning how to build a business.
Yeah, no doubt.
That you're gonna get blindsided and you're just gonna be like, well, I don't know. Like, guess we'll have to just go sort this. Like someone showed up on, that wasn't supposed to be there. Let's go like bring all these things up, or I miscounted and I missed a chair. Let's just like, go get some from under the barn. And
for sure.
So sorry, but like, you just figure it out.
The funny thing is, I don't know, I've probably been to 10 or 15 weddings in my life now. And everyone's always so drunk that like,
oh yeah,
the show must go on. But if you're half an hour late, like here or there, like most weddings I've been to, it's just total blur of just like eating, dancing, like making out with people. Like it's just chaos the whole way through. And to think of this like high stress situation going on behind the scenes that like, most people don't even recognize, but without like you're hurting a bunch of drunk people
Oh,
as well.
it's hurting people in. It's also ironic because it was a barn, so the cocktail hour was always outside, and the ceremony was usually outside unless it was raining. And so getting people from outside the barn to inside the barn was literally like hurting cattle because you're just like, there's a bunch of drunk people out in the sun all afternoon. You're like, come on, guys, we gotta go get some food into you. Like, let's go.
You want some pizza? You want some pizza? Come on, we got some snacks. Let's go.
But that's the thing about those situations, though, is that like, if no one else notices or is stressed out, then I have done my job well.
Yeah, it's like that subtle art.
It's like I'm just the weirdo running around with a clipboard behind the scenes, and they're like,
That's so good.
The evening was a bit different because then it's like there is a shift. So I felt like my job, not that it was done, but the way that we kind of had things organized was that once dinner was out, that's like the big thing, right? If you can keep people fed and you can give them drinks, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
totally.
So once dinner went out, that was usually the most stressful point.
Yeah.
And then everything kind of usually ran a little bit like clockwork after that. Like cleanup was pretty straightforward, everybody just knew their job. And then the responsibility of the evening for kind of like managing the like room or like the vibe kind of shifted to the bar staff.
Right.
Because then it's just drinks for the rest of the night. Totally. Yeah. And like them kind of dealing with things and DJ. And so then usually after dinner was when I would start to like slowly
that makes sense.
Make my way.
Because dinner's that apex, right?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's usually when the speeches happen.
Usually, yeah.
Like either like in the middle of dinner, you get like the toasts and stuff, or is it before dinner that like the big speeches happen and then people kind of just get up and talk?
People can it's up to them. There's like a couple of different ways that people do them. You can do all the speeches kind of in one fell swoop and like get them out of the way, either right at the beginning or at the end.
Yeah.
A lot of people will do speeches in between courses.
Right.
So like while we're clearing, that's usually what I recommend is like if we're clearing plates, like get someone up to give a speech. You never want to keep people waiting to eat their food because they're trying to listen to someone speak. Yeah. That's my opinion. I think just to make like an enjoyable experience for the guests.
Totally. And there's that awkwardness too. It's, 200 people sometimes. I've been to some pretty big. My sister married a lovely Italian man. And I think there might have been 300 people at their wedding. But like their family, they kind of bring in their huge family. They don't necessarily all like really know each other that well. It's just so many branches of different groups of people and then our family and stuff. So yeah, there is like, you don't want to have any deadpan moments when people don't quite know each other. It's like keep the booze flowing and keep the entertainment going, kind of like a real production, right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And people are happy. So that's my story.
Good one.
What's yours? I'm very curious.
Okay, this is going back to when I first got to Vancouver Island. I would say this is like, you call it a quarter life crisis, call it like, the 28 to 32 period that everyone seems to have where like something big happens, there's radical life shifts at that time.
I quit my job and moved to Fiji for a while and then came out here when I was 30. So yeah, it's like right in the middle of that.
Yeah. Most people I know have had some sort of very strange, weird shift. There's like something around that age where like 30's coming and there's that like societal pressure that you feel like, oh, I should be this, or I should have my like shit figured out in my career or whatever it is. I never really worried about the career stuff, but I was like always being like, I got to find my purpose and like something that like, so I was searching a lot. Got to the island, was doing some volunteer work, meeting awesome people, having a great time. But I still was just like, I need to dig my teeth into something. Like I really got to get going. So I started going around to various like meetup groups, and I ended up at a hotel for this like real estate investment seminar, which you know a little bit about.
I know a little bit. Some tidbits.
I was interested in real estate when I got to the island because I was like, I love this place and it'd be cool to own some stuff here. But I had no income at the time. I had a decent amount of money saved up from my previous career life. And so I was like, getting into that mode of like, I'm going to invest in myself. I never really like went to school. I didn't do that. Like tried it, dropped out. Wasn't for me, but I'm going to invest in myself. And then you go to these seminars and these people are the best salespeople you've ever met in your life. It's like they were trained by Tony Robbins, which I learned afterwards.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, oh shit, no wonder they got my money. But I do this seminar, free one first, first one's free. And they just give you all this really juicy information that's very leading. And then the next one's a full weekend seminar, $200. So I was like, oh, that's great value. I'll go sit in a seminar for 3 days, $200. By the end of the third day, they like really roll out the big packages and like the 2-year programs and stuff. And I got into a 2-year program with this bunch of strangers from the US, this company that rolled through that I'd really only known for 3 or 4 days.
I was just going to say, how long had you known them for? So it's just a few days now.
Yeah, that's it. Like they have big, long seminars, which is part of the, like long days, like 10, 11-hour days. It's like they're kind of just in there programming you. You're learning a ton of shit. And I was just like fired up. I'm like, oh my God, I've never learned so much about financial education in one weekend. Like I want more.
But you're also probably like a weird combination of like fired up and exhausted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's when they get you. But so anyways, by the end of the weekend, I had agreed to a $42,000 tuition for 2 years, 42 grand. And it just didn't even in like weeks later, it didn't seem weird to me. I was just like, I'm doing this. I was so set that not necessarily being like a high level real estate investor, but it was like, this is for my financial education. And like, this is going to pay dividends for the rest of my life. And then there's a crazier second part to it is that I kept going. I think there was something going on in my life at that point where I was very easily manipulated and talked into stuff. And I signed up for another like entrepreneurship stock trading course online through Rich Dad Coaching.
Okay, so not through the same organization.
Not through the same organization. Okay. I had like gotten hooked into another thing. I was still going to meetups. I was just chasing and searching and dropped another 15,000. So I'm like 57 grand now into like, my financial education for the rest of my life, but I have no income at this time either.
Yeah.
And 2 months after all this, I'm like going through the course material and then it's like, oh shit, this is still going to be a ton of work. And yes, I have great coaches and great support, but I don't really know what I'm doing. I just moved to this city. I have no network, no contacts. None of these people from these courses are from this city. So like, I don't get the networking benefit. I met a few good people, but then, then that dread started to set in where I'm like, that was all the money I saved up in my 20s.
I was just going to ask that. I'm like, so just to have like, some context, it's like, is this all of your savings basically?
Pretty much. It was like 3/4 of it.
Yeah.
So I was down to like 20 grand, just being like 20 grand, still no income.
Yeah. So you now need to live off of that money, which is probably dwindling.
Oh yeah. Like I started going close to negative and I was just like, oh my God, what have I done? And had a couple of legit panic attacks. It's the only time in my life that I went on anti-anxiety medication because I just couldn't get my nerves under control of like learning this completely new world of like business and stuff. And like the silver lining is, I did some stuff in real estate. I actually did 3 deals and like kind of forced myself. It was this like, you talk about being hard on yourself. I was like, I'm not letting myself like have this education just completely go to waste. Like I have to do this. And I didn't enjoy it at all.
Right.
There were maybe parts of it that like were fun, but I did realize that industry is just like not for me. Like it was very like complex relationship management of putting together teams and flipping houses. And I did 2 of them and then got into an investment with my buddy Mackenzie. And that one worked out really great. Built a couple of tiny houses. That was super fun. That's like a huge silver lining.
That's also why I was able to move into your apartment.
Yeah. So if I hadn't done all that crazy shit, and this is the silver lining of like big, what you perceive at the time as big financial fuck ups and panic attacks and, 2 years of stress and everything that was going on at the time is that, if I didn't buy that house with Mackenzie, I wouldn't have left the apartment that you moved into. And now we're here and we've got this business and it's like, oh, maybe this business was the, like all that energy I was putting out is like, I need to sink my teeth into something. I knew there was like a direction I needed to go. I needed to take some risks and make some moves. So I just started doing shit. And then once we met and we started talking about the business and hiring our friends, and I was like, oh, this is what feels good. That other shit that I was doing, just like I wasn't in alignment with that at all. But without that, I wouldn't have found this.
Yeah.
Which is the craziest, like so trippy to think about it, because I still will get in my head and, I'll be looking at my financial spreadsheet and be like, man, I really wish I didn't spend all that money on that. And it's like, well, if I didn't do it, like I wouldn't be here. Like who knows what I'd be doing? Like I'd be on a completely different life path. And my previous career was in telecommunications. I had my own contracting company. So like 180s, just like here and there and back and forth all over the place in that 27 to like 30, by the time we were 31, I guess 31, that's when Goldilocks had kind of like got it. And I was like, okay, here's some direction.
You're like,
let's go this way.
This feels better. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it still had a lot of the, maybe more like not adrenaline side of things, but you know what I mean? Like when you're wanting to do something different.
Yeah. You know what it was? This is interesting. Is like, I'm a very logical, like linear thinker, and I like to be able to see. So in my previous career was like, do a job, get paid, do a job, get paid. Like I got paid per job. And I knew going to this job is $150. Like no matter how fast I do it, I just know that like complete this and like get rewarded. When I was doing that in like the real estate world, it was so like there were so many things like shifting constantly, and interest rates and like different deals, and people were negotiating with you, and like maybe the market shifts down the road and you just don't know what's going to happen. So it was very like challenging. But when we met and we started selling beeswax wraps, I was like, make a set of beeswax wraps, go to the market, sell them. People hand you cash. And I was like, oh, let's just do this.
Yeah, over and over.
Yeah.
And over.
And I was like, I
can
can, put some systems in. We can speed this up. We can hire some people, because I could see the full circle.
Yeah, you could see the path.
And I really liked that, how it was like, we are just turning this into money. And then it just like, I could watch it happen. And that was super satisfying to me, mixed with good people, good vibes. And so it just felt very in alignment. And I was like, okay, this is like, I can really sink my teeth into this and go and stop freaking out so much.
Yeah, and you can see where it might be leading to.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you see the response from people, like those Christmas markets that we had. It was just like, there's like 30 people in front of the booth, like handing money over the heads of other people. And I was like,
about that.
Yeah, it was wild, right? So you're just like, okay, this is like, I can see. The other way was like, I was trying to create something from, strategies and stuff. But I was like, I feel like I'm trying to force myself into this market in a way that like, there might not actually be the demand here. It was like trying to create it too much from nothing.
Felt forced.
It felt very forced.
Yeah.
And, we did a couple of successful things, and then there was like another one that came across my plate, and it was that crux of like, someone brought a deal to us, which, because once you start doing some stuff and people start to hear about you, and
in real estate, you mean?
Yeah. People start to know your name. Then other people kind of just like, hey, I like what these guys are doing. So they start bringing things to you, and you're attracting, which is, I think, the corner that everybody wants to turn. And that was starting to happen. And I was like, whoa, this is like, and I didn't like it. I was like, stop bringing stuff to me. I had friends reaching out like, hey, I got like $100,000. Like, could you put this to work for me? And I was like, well, that's too much responsibility. But again, in that industry, that's like what everybody wants. They're like, I wish people were just cutting me checks so I could go and like play with it. But it wasn't for me. And it was just like, I'm in too deep. This isn't in alignment with like who I am at this point in my life. Like, it's down the road. And I just couldn't do it. So that deal that came to me, and it was a great deal. It would have been awesome to do it. It was right when we were kind of like getting ramped up and things were really starting to move. And I was doing Goldilocks and the real estate thing at the same time. And I was like, I can't do both of these. So it was like, wasn't actually that hard of a decision. I was just like, no, this one feels good. This one doesn't feel good. Sure, I can see the money on this side now on the real estate. I could actually see the circle at that point where I'm like, yeah, 6 months, like we're going to make 60 grand on this deal, and that's going to be amazing. But it was like, I knew what I had to go through to do it. And I didn't enjoy that 6-month process that I was looking at. But when I looked at the 6-month process in Goldilocks, I was like, I could do this all day. Like, this is so much fun. Yeah. It doesn't even feel like work. So that's it.
Yeah.
It's the full circle of the fuck up that turned into the reason why we know each other.
I know. I
so
feel like
crazy.
that's such a good, I love how, I feel like when I moved to the island, and I feel like you have somewhat of a similar experience, where it feels like everything kind of like fell into place, like very much in alignment with what I wanted. And I don't know. It was just like there's a lot of those like weird moments where you're just like, there's too many of those happening around that time frame, you know, where you start to just kind of be like, this is interesting.
Yeah. And
you know, but again, you don't see them until like at the time.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
didn't even know they were happening. But
Yeah.
it's like now when you look back, right?
Yeah.
But,
well, so I lived in Calgary for 8 years, making good money, enough money to like buy a house and do all that. But it never even occurred to me to like buy a home there, even though I had the ability to do it. I was just like, nah, I'd rather not. And it was because I didn't actually like that city that much. I liked what it provided. It was good work. It was close to the mountains. I could live a pretty good lifestyle there. But there was part of me that knew, I'm like, this is just a stopping point. Like, I'm not going to be here forever.
You're putting down roots.
Exactly. And then this weird thing happened when I came to Victoria. I was here for 2 or 3 months. All of a sudden I'm like on the realtor app, like looking at houses, but I don't have any money. Like I have money saved up, but I'm broke. So no one would give me a mortgage, but I was like looking at houses and like going to these real estate meetups. And I was like, what am I doing? And I didn't realize it again at the time, but 3 months, 4 months down the road after doing that, I was like, oh, I just really want to be here. And I want to figure out how to like put down some roots here. And even though like my situation doesn't make sense for this, I'm like putting it in that direction, subconsciously being like, this is the spot. I gotta like stay here.
Yeah, put it out into
and
the
everything
universe.
will be okay.
Yeah.
So
I love that. And I feel like it's a good
here.
transition to what we were wanting to also talk about today on this episode, which is kind of creating a culture within the workspace. So it sounds like what you were saying earlier about when you had to make that decision about like, you know, am I going to go down this more like real estate path, or am I going to go forward with this thing that, you know, is very new with Goldilocks? It almost sounds like that, like that was like the very beginning, maybe, or like the seed of what we would maybe now call like, I hate the word corporate culture, but like I don't really know what other word to use. Culture. Yeah, just call it
internal culture. I think.
Yeah,
is good,
internal
right?
culture. I like better. It sounds less like, I don't know, floofy and
that word corporate
just makes me feel icky.
It's a dirty word.
Yeah, but I feel like that's kind of what maybe pulled you in, along with other things. But like that seems like that was maybe the very beginning, or like the seedling of what kind of developed naturally as we continued to grow.
Yeah, I would say it pulled me in, but then it also gave me like that compass of stay true to this. Like, this is why you wanted to be here and go on this path. Like, really rad people, being able to like work on our own time and like choose who we want to work with. So like, don't compromise on that. And then it's like, how do we keep all these amazing people around? Right. So that was like kind of baked in at the beginning of just like, I feel good in this. I want to continue to feel good. And I want everybody that comes into our space or joins us in working in our business to feel this same like energy and excitement. Right. Because it's like, then they'll want to stay, they'll want to contribute, they feel like they're actually a part of it. And yeah, so that's kind of how it started, and we went from there.
How do you think we were able to like actually facilitate that in hindsight? Like if people are listening and they're like, okay, that all sounds great, I obviously want to work with people that are also excited and want to be here.
Yeah.
How did we do that?
Yeah, I think trust, trust and gratitude are two huge things, right? Like if you're starting a business, the first thing you got to do is just like, even like look someone in the eye when you hire someone. I trust you. Like, I know you're going to do the right thing. You know what to do here. And they're like, yeah, I know what to do. And you're like, great. Well, then like, let's just have fun and get it done. And you just really embody that you're not hanging over their shoulder. No micromanaging is a big thing that we did. And then the gratitude side is like, you're so grateful that you've started this thing, and other people, when they have all these other options, like people don't have to work for you. They can go work anywhere, right? Like there's, especially in Victoria, there's like tons of different like jobs and like kind of the entry level position, right? You can go serve somewhere, you could be bartender, you go work at one of the many retail stores, you go work in the tourist industry. Like there's tons of options for younger people to get involved and get into work. Why do they want to work with you? So it's like embodying that gratitude of like, I'm just so happy that you're here. Like, thank you for working with us and contributing to making this like a really fun and exciting environment. And then, do you have any other friends, or do you know anybody that wants to work with us that like shares this same level of excitement? And you just kind of, you keep building that through. And so like trust and gratitude, I think, is two big things that I really felt in the beginning.
Yeah. I like that. And I think that the trust and gratitude also lends itself to kind of having those then expectations in return, that there's going to be a level of accountability with like someone that you hire. It's like, well, if I'm trusting you,
Mm.
I need, then that means that I also have the expectation that you're going to do what you say you're going to do,
Right.
that you're going to get the work done that you say that you're going to get done.
Yeah.
And then if those things don't happen and then the trust is broken, then it's like, well, then we need to have a conversation. Right. I feel like that's where what you were talking about earlier. And I think in the last episode, even where it's like the trust just give them that trust, give them an opportunity to prove themselves, just kind of lead with the assumption that that's the way that it's going to go.
Right.
Don't go the other way around.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't build mutual respect and like mutual trust.
For sure.
I feel like kind of a situation that I feel like is maybe similar to that and was something that really shaped me when I was younger was I had a really awesome art teacher in high school. We loved him, Mr. Payette.
Mr. Payette?
Yeah, Mr. Payette. Percy Payette.
Percy.
Yeah, he's
a good name. You don't meet a lot of Percys.
You would love him. He's a great dude. He's actually the reason I ended up going into art history. Okay. He was the first. So the way I'm going to digress for a second, but hang on. There is a point to this. But the way that he taught was that because it was an open course, so it wasn't necessarily a like path to university, path to college, path to art school. It was like you had a mix of everybody on every different trajectory, right? So he would do art history every Fridays. Because his theory was like, well, some of you are going to want to go more into the academia route. Right. The other 4 days a week, we're just doing art, like applied arts. Right. And so that was the first time that I'd ever had an introduction to that. It might've been like maybe grade 11, grade 12. And I loved it. It was also the first time I'd ever had a lecture. It was the first time that, because like I remember in high school, there were always being these like projectors and they would just have like the notes. Right. You would basically just copy what was on the screen. This was the first time it was like projected onto the screen was a piece of art. Right. And he would just talk. And it was so hard for me to take lecture notes. Like that was my first, and there was no like talk about how to do it. You just kind of had to figure it out. Right. So I feel like by the time I got to first year university, I was actually like, I was ready. I like knew how to take lecture notes. I knew I had that style of teaching before. So it was a little less overwhelming in a slightly like, cause it's scary going off to university, like by yourself and like all the things. But he was also very much somebody who like trusted all of his students. He was probably the first person that I ever had that treated us like what felt like adults, And so he would leave the art room open at the end of the day when he wasn't there. He would just say, I'm going to trust you all to be here after hours, like the way some people would with like, going to sports or going to do this. But it's like, if your thing is art and you want to just stay and have access to these like facilities and, supplies and stuff, like you stay, that's fine. Don't do anything that's going to ruin this for everybody else. Like I'm now treating you as an adult, act like an adult, have that level of responsibility, like lock up, do all of the things. I don't even remember like what the procedures were or like how that all like the logistics of it. Right. But I just remembered being like, whoa, like that's the first time that someone's done that.
Not treating me like a child. Like I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And it was like, he trusted everybody and everybody loved him. Yeah. Like, I don't know anybody that didn't like love this man. Cause like art is also just like such a unique thing to be teaching. And, there's such a like emotion and passion behind it for a lot of people that are taking those courses. Yeah. But then also because it was like, I don't want to let you down. Right. Like, I don't ever want this person to be disappointed in me. Right. I would have been so crushed. Yeah. If I ever felt like I had like done
you've
something.
Given me all this trust.
Like literally could have been jeopardizing his job. Like had something gone wrong. Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that that's like also hopefully what people feel when they're working here too, where it's like, they don't, we trust them and we care about them. And like, hopefully there's also that kind of like reciprocation where it's like, well, we also don't want to like wrong you guys or like, do anything bad. Yeah. It doesn't always happen that way. We can get into some, messy stories. But
we've had a couple of messy stories, but I mean, if you really take like the percentage, it's been 5 years now. 4.5 years. We've probably had 30 to 40 people like work for Goldilocks. Right now we're at like 7 or 8. It's kind of a comfortable staff number for us, 7 to 10 probably, depending on the season. But out of those like 40 people, I would say like 90 to 95% have really worked out.
Oh, and they've been amazing. And
yeah. And it's like, so, you can't lie with the numbers. It's like when you trust people first and you respect them and you ask them like, what makes you happy in a workspace? You encourage them to show up as themselves, right? If you're feeling shitty or fucked up, just like let us know. Tell everyone. We started doing 2-word check-ins in the morning just so everybody can kind of get a vibe for who's where in their like daily mental health, right? Which is huge, right? Because so many times I think when you're working with someone and you don't have those check-ins and someone's like really quiet, you're like, oh, are they pissed off me? Did I do something wrong? But when they say like, yeah, I got into like some shit with my partner last night and like I'm just not feeling good. Yeah. It's like, cool. Thanks for letting us know. And like, yeah, I'm just going to wear my headphones all day because like I don't really feel like talking. And it's like, awesome. You should definitely do that. And like, I'm really glad that we know it's not because you're upset with something that happened yesterday at the studio.
Yeah,
you
it's not something that I did.
Yeah.
Or, hey, do you want to go for a walk on break? And like, do you want to talk about it? You don't have to. It's just so like everybody kind of knows. And it's like, we're here to support you.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about it, sometimes that's really helpful, but you also aren't like obligated to.
Right.
Sometimes you're just like, yeah, I just want to check out, put my headphones in. Also, shout out to Brene Brown. That's where I learned the 2-word check-in from her Dare to Lead podcast.
Ah, right on.
Yeah.
Brene's fucking awesome.
We all know I have a big love for all the Brene Brown things.
Whit's got a big Brene Brown crush too.
Yeah. So that's where that came from, because they do that at her corporation or
awesome.
work, wherever you want to call it. But yeah.
And they're hard. Like that's one thing I would say, especially for myself. Like first thing in the morning, I've just had a coffee, come in, and it's like, how do I feel? Like, and it happens to everybody around the table. You really have to think, how do I feel today? But then these playful conversations happen, and we just kind of let our morning meetings run, 20, 30 minutes sometimes, trying to be the most like efficient way to do things. But I believe that if everybody feels comfortable throughout the whole day, and you start off by just kind of goofing around and, telling stories about why you feel this way. Oh, this happened last night. Maybe it's a good thing, like a fun story that happened. And like, so I'm stoked today.
Well, and it helps people feel more connected, I think, too, right? Because like, we're all working in different areas of the business, in different like physical locations. Like I'm upstairs on my computer a lot of the time. Production staff are downstairs. And, when we all get kind of really like zoned in on what we're doing, you're not always like having kind of like meaningful conversations. It's like, oh, I'm just on my way to the bathroom. Hi. Going back upstairs kind of thing. So I think it's a nice way to have that like kind of human connection as well. And I think it's something that we realized as we've grown and as we've had, different staff and different iterations. We've always been a pretty small team.
Yeah.
We actually prefer like smaller is kind of better in a lot of instances.
Yeah. But we 14 once, and that felt a little chaotic.
Too much. But it was like realizing, I think, like how big of an impact that people's like attitudes, moods, and like, I don't know, whatever else you want to like call it, kind of like characteristics that like coming into work has such a big effect on the rest of the space. Because when you only have maybe like 4 or 5 people in here at a time, if someone's like walking around and like slamming stuff down and like huffing and puffing, it's like
short with other
everybody else is all of a sudden walking on eggshells. And then that's not great for anybody. It's not great for the person that's experiencing that, because, and maybe it's just because they're not aware. Like that's a big thing too. We're all people. Like you don't even necessarily know the impact that you are having on other people. So being able to sit down and I think like have those conversations with people when they are in those moments of like, hey, we've noticed this is happening. Like, first of all, are you okay? Like clearly something is going on. Maybe that diving into like a deeper conversation of, or not, depending on kind of like where they're at, but just kind of then saying, hey, like, are you aware that like this is affecting the people that you're working around?
Right.
And just trying to be like gentle with that as much as possible. But I think it's just like, that's, I think, an expectation or something that we look for now. Right. I think this is something that we've learned over time is to hire people that have like a certain level of like emotional awareness.
Yeah, totally.
Who can say, this is how I'm feeling, even if it's hard, who can, like have those conversations, or, who don't get upset about having those conversations. Cause that kind of environment also isn't for everybody.
Totally.
Some people legitimately.
And that would be the 5 to 10% that I was talking about, where people come in and we try and foster this, and they're kind of shorting out a little bit.
Yeah. There's some resistance
for a bit, and then there's resistance, and then they falter and they show up,
or it's just uncomfortable, just like not what they want.
Exactly. And so you don't force anybody to to work here as well. Like as much as we're grateful for everybody that comes in, there's also this attitude, which I think is a really good thing to adopt as a business owner, is like, we are grateful to have you here, but you don't need to be here.
It
Right?
needs
Like,
to be, I think it's more of a like, it needs to be the right fit.
totally.
Right? Like the people that we want to stay and like hopefully foster like long term, it's like everybody needs to gel together, whether this is like something where they're like staying long term, or if it's something that they like have expressed to us, you know, like, hey, I have all of these like other audacious dreams and goals. This is something that I just want to do for like the time being. And it's like, okay, that's also awesome. And like we hope to like help you achieve those dreams. And in the interim, like we still have these expectations of like how you show up at work and what that looks like. But you know, some people just want to go to work and be left alone and then like go home at the end of the day, which is also fine. But I think that we've learned through our hiring processes, probably more so in the last like, I would say maybe like year. I feel like for me anyways, personally, I've learned the most about like how to like conduct an interview, to like learn some of those things in the beginning, how to get some of that out of people. Having like trial shifts has been really huge for us. And then also involving the other staff. Right. Because that's a big thing where I'm like, I don't want to make somebody who's already working here spend their days with someone who they're like, oh, I don't like, I used to like going into work. And now that this person is there, I don't want to go to work anymore.
Right.
Because one person can have a massive, massive impact on like the entire kind of like culture dynamic. Like all of a sudden other people who were really chatty get really quiet. And you're kind of like, what is happening? And I feel like it's sort of on us as leaders to also like be paying attention to that. And I'll admit that that was something that like I probably wasn't really paying attention to at all in the beginning, because I was so removed in my day to day versus like what was happening in the production, which is I think also why it's really nice to do those check-ins, because it's also like a good way for people who aren't involved in that particular role every day to still get a pulse of like, what's the team dynamic like how are people getting along? Like you can kind of just start to suss some of those things out. And then at the end of the day, it's almost like once you get to, like, I think the goal of a business is to like get to a place where you have that staff and you have your like ideal, you know, workplace situation where people are really excited to come into work every day. I feel like we have that right now where everybody's like, sweet. I love coming into work. Like I look forward to it. Like we all get along so well. It's so like, it's such a good vibe. If one of us is having a bad day, we actually like coming in because we have the option to talk to each other about it and maybe vent and get some perspective or like support. Like it is such a great environment. And I feel like that's like the goal, right, of what like people want to get to. And then I feel like it's like maintaining that is also such a big part where you almost not have to go on like the defensive, because I don't mean it that way, but like if we were to now hire somebody new, right, it's like I'm going to be really careful to make sure that that's going to be a good fit.
You want to protect what we've fostered.
And it's like here. If you do see those things creeping in that are like the red flags, it's like, okay, I feel like I'm more equipped, and I think I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like we all probably feel that way. Anybody that's kind of more in like that manager role, to kind of be like, we're going to nip that in the bud right now. We're going to either have a conversation or we're just going to talk about whether or not this is still a good fit, reevaluate, like, almost just being like, you want to protect like the people that we have that we like,
which is a sweet
who've
feeling.
Worked so hard for us.
That's when you know you've got like that good, almost like family dynamic where like everybody's kind of looking out for each other. And it's been this 4.5 year experiment.
It's taken it's been an ongoing
and so many
process.
Amazing people have run through, but human beings are so complicated, and like we're all going through so much shit all the time. And so there's a lot of empathy that needs to be built into that system as well, of just there's so many days you're like, I just got so much shit to do, and then someone's in a bad mood and you're like, fuck, really? Like you just want to be like, get out, but you can't. You can't do that. And sometimes you're that person where like you come in and you're not in a good place and you're affecting people. And I'm sure people are like, if you weren't here, man, as like the owner of the business, the show would be a lot better. But like, so it's a very like complicated 2-way street, and there's no playbook on how to do it. It's just like trust, gratitude, empathy, and understanding that at the end of the day, like we're all here because we have a bigger purpose of Goldilocks and the vision of the business and our ethos, but also like we need money to survive. Like we all need to make money.
Yeah.
So there is that balance of like, at the end of the day, like we're all doing this because we got bills to pay, we got to eat, and we're human beings with like these complex emotions. And that needs to be managed, because the opposite is, you know, the nasty side of just everybody shutting off and showing up and punching the clock. And, you know,
which is the way some businesses operate, and they operate probably
interested.
really well.
Yeah, not gonna have it here.
But it was something that I feel like we were very conscious of not wanting to be like that.
Totally.
I think a big part of that was also because of the friendship and dynamic that like you and I had,
right,
where there was like that level of trust. And we've talked about like when, you know, in the beginning where it kind of was like waxing therapy, because you're having a lot of these like really awesome conversations. People are building like bonds. That happened with you and I. It also happened with like that first like initial staff. And like you said, it was such a good feeling. And it was like, how do we not lose that?
right.
Because this is so awesome. And it's such a like, and we want other people to be able to feel that.
Totally.
And I think for people who are like looking, or, you know, looking to build a culture, or like kind of thinking like, what does that even mean? Right? Like, what are we doing? I feel like regardless of what that means to you as a business owner, I think like, you know, some people are like, we're going to want to have fun, right? Well, what does fun mean? Are you listening to music? Are you listening to podcasts? Are you doing trivia? Like, you know, asking some of those questions. But I think those are the more like icing on the cake kinds of things, you know, like going for lunches, doing team bonding events, like all that kind of stuff to me needs to have that. Yeah, that's like the perks, the icing. It's like the foundation, the really like meaty stuff needs to be like the dynamics that you have between each other as staffing. And like you said, that level of trust. And I think even like below that is just like recognizing that we are all at the end of the day just human beings. Right? I think a lot of places that have those like not horror stories, but the places that, you know, you think of and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't ever want to work there, is like that kind of, especially because we're in manufacturing. So it's like technically we're a factory, right? Like we're a beeswax wrap manufacturing facility. Like if you're getting like really specific, it's more than that. Like, you know what I mean?
Getting technical about
getting technical.
We list ourselves as a manufacturing company all the time.
Yeah, when you choose that drop down list, I remember having
it's
a moment one day with Brett where I was like, do I have to pick manufacturing? I just like didn't, you know, as a handmade product, I was like, this feels weird. This feels icky, because I envision these like big like car. My dad worked at GM, right? These like car plants, those like things where that what like he was a number, right? Like those are the kind, and like they don't care about him as an individual, you know, and he knows that. And it was very much like a job, and that's what supported our family, which was really great. But there's so many places that are out there that are like that, where it's just like, yeah, you just show up. It doesn't matter if you destroy your body for them. It doesn't matter if you hate your commute every day and you're on. It's just like, we didn't want to do that.
Right. Well, it just wasn't about that. Like it's different time now, right? Where past generations, it was just, that wasn't mental health, like wasn't even a conversation in our parents' generation. Like the baby boomers, especially the men of baby boomers, like there's no hanging out with your buddies and being vulnerable. Like that does not exist. I've talked to my dad about it, and he's like, I never talked to my friends about that. Like, what about your brothers? No, that's not what we talk about. I was like, what do you guys talk about? You know, and I like hang out with them, and it's just like, it's bullshitting. It's having a good time. It's fun. It's, you know, but you start to get into those conversations of feelings and emotion, and you watch everyone just shut down real quick. And that's not for all of the baby boomers, but I think that's where our generation has like taken a leap, and then it, you know, continues to like move forward over time, right? So
yeah, it continues to evolve. And I think another thing too with that is that like if we or you, like whoever is the people listening, the listeners, have that expectation of being like emotionally aware, emotionally intelligent, vulnerable. If that's like whatever it is, you know, for us, that's because that's what it was for us. But whatever your expectations are, I think, of your staff for your corporate culture, you need to be the one that like does those things in order to open up that space
You have
to
to
allow
embody it.
your staff to do it.
Right.
You know, you can't just be like, well, you need to be emotionally intelligent, and then you're the one, like
Shut
you
down.
said, that's like running around rumbling. It's like, it's really helpful if, you know, you in those morning check-ins when, you know, you talk about something that was like really vulnerable that happened that week, and then it's
Right.
like all of a sudden people start to open up and those
Yeah.
conversations start to happen, and it's like, so you, like, as the founder who's making those, or like the owners, as you're like leading the way,
Yeah.
you really need to be the ones that like act.
Yeah. I feel like that's another Brene Brown thing, like leading with vulnerability.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
Or like Esther Perel, any of these amazing women who, like, if you want to dig into the emotional intelligence work within a business or within your relationship, those two people right there are just like incredible to follow and listen to their podcasts and read their books. And I know we've both done that.
Yeah.
And that's great to so just figure out your own shit first, right?
Yeah.
Start to figure out your own shit first, and then worry about everybody else, really, right? Because like if you don't have your a decent compass of just like managing your own emotions and staying calm under pressure and like what makes you tick, and if I'm acting like this, how do I affect other people? Get that under control first, and then doing it with other people is a lot easier.
Yeah. How do I respond to criticism?
Right.
Like those kinds of things, right? Do you have like a complete melt? Like you want to
Otherwise,
model
you're
that
just
behavior.
a tyrant telling everybody else to be a certain way, but you can't do it yourself.
We kind of lovingly joke, but I feel like it's also kind of accurate, where it does feel sometimes like, I mean, we're all the same, more or less the same age here, but it feels sometimes like, you know, we're the parents of the business because we're like, you know, the owners. And then it's like kind of similar things to, it's like, well, what do you want to model for like your children? Like, how do you want them to act? Like, they're going to reflect your behaviors. Like, it's a very similar, or there's like very parallel, I think, comparisons that can be made between those things.
Business becomes its own like little identity and personality, right? And then legally as well, like a corporation is its own entity. So you're like, Goldilocks is this thing that we've created now, and it's like has all these complex human beings with their own emotions and their own history and trauma, and how that all fits in, and like how do we all interact together within this thing that's now working and developed. Like everyone's just got to figure it out, and it's super messy, but I don't know, there's really no other option. So you just got to do it.
Yeah. Figure it out.
Figure it out
As you go.
Well, should we call it a day on this one?
I think that was a good one.
I feel like a nice smooth transition out of that one.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to talk about next.
I know, I was just thinking about that. I have a bit of a like brainstorm list in our project management system, but there's none that are jumping out at me right now. Okay. So
we're going on the weekend.
Yeah, we're going. It's Friday.
It's August. Things are slow.
Yeah, it's a very slow time of year.
You know, this is August 12th. We're recording this podcast. Another thing for business owners too. Nobody works in August.
All of a sudden,
nobody works that hard, anyways.
I've barely I scan my emails right now. There's not a lot of emails coming in and out of that inbox, which is amazing because I'm getting so many other things done.
Exactly. Yeah. August is one of those months. So yeah, we have like, it's like organization and systems month for operations downstairs, right? That's huge to do that. And if some of your digital systems are breaking in, throughout the year and you're busy, use August to tune things up.
Oh yeah.
So it's a good planning month, right? It's a good preparing month, but also you got to get out there and just take some time off yourself and relax.
Exactly.
Enjoy the weather. So I'm going to go do that this weekend.
I was going to say, let's go do that. We'll go enjoy the sun. It's been beautiful out here lately. So.
All right. Cool. Well, that's it for this one.
Awesome.
Bye, Amy.
Bye.